Everything had to be done under the cloak of darkness. So there in Luke 22, 63 through 65, we see he's first beaten during his arraignment and abused and ridiculed. In Mark chapter 14, and we don't have time to go there, but in Mark 14, 53 through 65, write the passage down, you can go and read that. They actually took Jesus to Caiaphas, the high priest, first. Matthew records the same thing. Luke omits the visit to Caiaphas, the high priest, because what they first wanted, they wanted the religious sanction that they will get the sentence they want. So they took him to Caiaphas, the high priest. Caiaphas, the high priest, in essence, basically pronounces judgment upon him, accuses him, and sentences him to blasphemy, and that he should be put to death. So now they got the religious sanction from Caiaphas, the high priest, who sat on as the ruler over the Jewish Sanhedrin. They now send him to Pilate. Pilate was the governor. So now what they want is the political condemnation of Jesus. The Jews, because they were not an autonomous nation, they could not sentence anyone to capital death by stoning or by crucifixion. Capital punishment could only be meted out by the Roman government. So they had to bring the Roman government in and make Rome a co-conspirator with them with the assassination of Jesus. Are you following me? Let me tell you what, greed and narcissistic preoccupation with one's own agenda, it can create some strange bedfellows. It's amazing who will conspire against the righteous. People ordinarily don't like each other. We find this right here in the Jews with their Sanhedrin. There were two major groups that were powerful. There were the Pharisees. They were the religious conservatives. They believed in the letter of the Old Testament law. They believed the Bible was the Word of God. Then there were the Sadducees. They were the religious liberals. The Sadducees did not believe in the entire Old Testament. They only believed in the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the Pentateuch or the law. That's all they believed in. The Sadducees they didn't believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in life after death. They didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe in much anything. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees didn't like each other. But they were able to come together and broker a deal when it came to Jesus, because they both realized that both of our kingdoms are getting ready to collapse if we let him stay alive. So they came together to conspire to assassinate Jesus. Now they got to bring in a co-conspirator, the Roman government itself, who only has the authority to sentence them to capital death. Are you following me? So now, they bring him back in before Caiaphas, and in Mark 14, he searches for false testimony against Christ. He can't find it. The high priest interrogates Jesus, but Jesus is silent. He won't speak to him. And then the high priest asked him point blank, "Are you the Christ?" And Jesus says, "I am." So then Caiaphas condemns Jesus to death. They then bring him before the Sanhedrin there in chapter 22, verse 66 to 71. So now the day is getting ready to break. So it says, as soon as it was day. That's important. Because now they're trying to legitimize it and make like this thing is legit. So they did this other stuff at night. Now they bring him before the Sanhedrin just before the day, once the day breaks, to say the court was legally convened during the day. So they bring him in before the Sanhedrin, the ruling class. You read there in those verses. They asked him, if you're the Christ, verse 67. He says, if I tell you, you'll by no means believe it. And if I also ask you, you will by no means answer me or let me go. Hereafter the Son of Man will sit on the right hand of the power of God. Then they all said, are you the Son of God? And he said to them, you rightly say that I am. And they said, what further testimony do we need? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth. And so now they've got the confession that they wanted. They want a confession from Christ that he is the Son of God, that he is the Messiah. And for the first time, he confesses openly and clearly that he is the Christ, the Son of God. Now, the problem is that if that is true, how do you condemn him to death? They had not proved that it wasn't true, and there was a preponderance of evidence based on his life, the miracles, the resurrection of Lazarus, his profound teaching. There was a body of work that even their chief teacher, Nicodemus, had said, no man do the miracles that you've done, except he be sent by God. So there was a preponderance of evidence to support the fact that he was the Son of God. But the goal was not to get to the truth. The goal was to get a confession. They already had decided on a conviction and to get Jesus out of the way. So now they move him to Pilate because they've satisfied the religious requirement to get a confession of blasphemy, which religiously they could condemn him to death under the Jewish religious law, but the Jewish religious law had no jurisdiction in Rome. You'll see this in the text. They now have to bring a charge against him that will stand up in the Roman court, and that he's committed a crime against Rome that is worthy of death by crucifixion. Are you following? So now they bring him before Pilate, chapter 23, verse 1. The whole multitude, they gather together, they take him to Pilate. And they begin to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the King. Now stop right there. In the interrogation before the Sanhedrin and before Caiaphas, they said nothing about taxes being paid. They said nothing about the Roman government. But now they bring him in before Pilate, and they know that Pilate doesn't want to hear anything about their religious superstitions. He didn't want to hear anything about him breaking some religious law, saying he's the Messiah, saying he's the Son of God. So what they have to do is they have to bring a charge against him that will stand up in the Roman court. So they said, look, this man is an insurrectionist. He is a subversive. He is a terrorist. He's trying to overthrow the Roman government. You couldn't commit a higher crime against Rome. This is high crimes here. Rome was all about tax collection. That's how they financed the empire. And the Roman emperor was all about emperor worship, that he was divine and there could be no other king, there could be no other ruler but him. So they bring the highest charges that could be brought against him without any facts, without any evidence, and without any habeas corpus. They have no case. It's all fabricated. But they're trying to pin Pilate into a box to force Pilate to make the decision to crucify Jesus. Now what happens as the text unfolds? So Pilate says, are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him and said, it is as you say. Now this is a slight play on word. Pilate asked him a specific question. Pilate says, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus says, it is as you say, I come to offer myself the king of the Jews. Pilate picked up on that. He picked up on the fact that Jesus was not stating a claim that he had jurisdiction over the Roman government, that he was not offering himself as a king instead of the Roman Caesar. He was only saying, I only came to offer my kingdom to this one group of folk that y'all don't like and don't think much of, these Jewish folk. So Pilate hears this, and he immediately understands, he really does understand, this has nothing to do with him committing a crime against Rome. This is all about their petty jealousy. Their petty jealousy against him, because now he is rivaling them in popularity with the Jewish people. Pilate asks a narrow question. Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus says, it's exactly as you say, I am the king of the Jews. When Jesus came to the earth the first time, he did not come to offer himself as the king of the nation. He only came to offer himself to the Jewish people. He came to offer them himself as their Messiah, as their long-awaited king. And they rejected him. So now Pilate picks up on this, and Pilate realized now that they got me in a corner here because I'm always having problems with these Jewish folk with the Roman authorities. So what Pilate tries to do is he tries to pass the buck. Verse 5. Well, verse 4, then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, I find no fault in this man. So in his first judgment, Pilate says, not guilty, no charges that can stick against him. He's exonerated. I can find no fault with him. But they stir